Hey, what's going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners. Kyle coming to you from the Draft.com studios with Week 3 waiver wire targets for you to give your team maybe a little bit of a boost. We're a couple weeks into the season now. We're starting to see maybe some trends with a couple of different players. So if you feel like you need some help on your team, I've got several guys, couple guys at least from each position for you to take a look at this week when you put in your waiver wire claims or submit some fab money to try and grab these guys and put them on your team. Now, as always, keep in mind, with these players, all of them are less than 50% owned. So we're taking a look at the guys that everybody basically are going to have a shot at. We're not going to be taking a look at guys that are like 70% owned, that the only way you're going to get if you're in a 10-team league or something like that. Nope. All of these guys you should have a decent shot at grabbing unless you're in a very deep league, like 16 teams is what we're talking here. So let's move forward. Let's jump into it. A lot of targets to talk about on this episode. Pay attention. One of these guys might help you win some fantasy football matchups here pretty soon. All right, we're taking a look at quarterbacks first, and we had some injuries this past weekend that might be messing with your fantasy roster a little bit. So Carson Wentz on Sunday night had to leave the game. He's dealing with something. Ben Roethlisberger obviously has an issue as well. Drew Brees, we've heard about those things. So a lot of veteran quarterbacks, Nick Foles, Andrew Luck, obviously missing here as well. So with all these different things going on at the quarterback position, we've got some guys to talk about. Now, if you're in a superflex or a 2-quarterback league, you're not going to be focused on these 3 guys because they're probably already taken. You're going to be focused on a Gardner Minshew. You're going to be focused on Teddy Bridgewater. What's going to happen there? Maybe Taysom Hill gets a little bit, not that much. So we're not going to worry about him too much. It's Teddy Bridgewater moving forward. And then Mason Rudolph from the Steelers. But in a 1-quarterback league, let's talk about these 3 guys. So Josh Allen, 4 total touchdowns, 2 of them on the ground, just over 500 yards passing. And the reason that he's all the way down to 28.1% owned is because the upside in the first couple of weeks with his legs just hasn't been there. But that could be coming back. So Devin Singletary, he had to leave the game yesterday. It sounds like he's got a hamstring issue. We'll see what happens with that. And then obviously Frank Gore being your main running back, he's no spring chicken. So maybe moving forward, we start to see some of that upside come back. Maybe the Bills start to throw in some more designed runs for Josh Allen, maybe some keeper type things. We'll see what happens. Some RPOs that could end up helping him. That could boost his fantasy value just like it did down the stretch at the end of last season when he helped a lot of owners win some championships. We'll see if that comes back with the injuries here in the backfield. Now, keep in mind, too, with the arm, one of the concerns that we had was his accuracy issues. Could he grow as a quarterback from last year to this year? Now, he did struggle a little bit at the beginning of week 1. He has a couple of interceptions, and his accuracy hasn't been great yet. There's been some balls that really he should have hit that he didn't that could have cost the team. There was one specifically this weekend with John Brown that he missed. But it hasn't really cost him a whole lot at this point. It hasn't cost the team a whole lot at this point. I'd be much more concerned with his accuracy issues if he was throwing interceptions and he looked that much worse. So moving forward, if you've had an injury to one of these guys, Josh Allen could see some of that ceiling that he's been missing come back from last season. So take a shot at him if you need help at quarterback. What about our boy Jimmy G out in San Francisco, finally slinging it? And the one thing that I've told fantasy owners is keep an eye on him because, yeah, he might not look good in the preseason, and week 1 might not be what we're looking for. But as the weeks go on, he's going to get better. He's working his way back from being out all last season. He's got some rust. He's got to get that off. He's got to get back into the flow of things, and it's working. And he looked good this weekend against the Cincinnati Bengals. 17 of 25 for 297 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's only 24.8% owned. And he's got Kyle Shanahan as his head coach. So we know that offense is going to be good. It's going to be dynamic. We saw a lot from the running backs this weekend. We saw a lot from the wide receivers. Deebo Samuel's looking good. Marquise Goodwin, I mentioned him last week on the Waiver Wire show. He's got a little bit of connection with Jimmy G again. So I urge you to keep an eye on him as well. Now, if you're not wanting to invest right away, understand. Josh Allen's probably got a little bit higher ceiling than him right now because, again, of the potential on the ground. But Jimmy Garoppolo is the guy that you do not want to miss on if you're in a one-quarterback league and you're going to be looking for some help. And honestly, with the way quarterbacks are going down right now, if if you're in a deeper league and you can afford to do it, you might want to hold a second quarterback. I don't typically like to do that, but we're seeing a lot of quarterbacks go down right now. Might just want to prepare for the worst. All right, number 3 on this list, Andy Dalton, only owned in 9.2% of fantasy leagues, but the dude has over 90 attempts in the first 2 games this season. Now, I was all in on the Cincinnati offense after the hiring of Zach Taylor to become the head coach. I was all aboard. I was ready for it. I thought he was going to bring a lot of good things to Cincinnati. But then injuries started to happen, right? 2 guys from the offensive line, one goes down from it with an injury, one retires, another retires. And then A.J. Green obviously has his issue flare up again. So what's going to happen? Well, we thought there could be some issues with that. And honestly, Andy Dalton has looked really, really good over the first couple of weeks, even with all those things happening around him. The passing game is really flowing. John Ross is holding a lot of value right now. Tyler Boyd had a big week. Tyler Eifert got into the end zone again. Now we got to get Joe Mixon healthy and get him moving. He didn't have a great week. So they don't really have much of a run game right now, but Andy Dalton's looking good. 729 yards and 4 touchdowns. Like I mentioned, 93 passing attempts already. A high-volume guy. He's going to have those games where he's going to throw a few interceptions, so if you are trying to start him on a weekly basis, just have to keep in mind that those performances will come at some point in time. But he's going well right now. He's a good stash, especially at only 9.2% owned. You can get him fairly easy in a lot of leagues right now. I would take a shot on him if you're looking for something at quarterback because he will produce more than enough volume for you. All right, we are going to move on to one of my favorite nicknames that we've come up with on this show. At running back, the very first name, 10.6% owned, Raheem, not quite a must-start, Mostert. Now, this guy is back. He is ready to roll. He took advantage of his opportunities this weekend, and we could see a lot more of him moving forward. This weekend, 151 total yards against Cincinnati, a 39-yard receiving touchdown. He averaged 6.4 yards per carry. The guy's agile. He has a lot of burst, and he's the perfect complement to Matt Breida. So you can own both of these guys. As we saw this week, both of these guys looked really good. Breida on the ground, Mostert getting some work through the air on the ground as well. Kyle Shanahan knows what to do with these running backs. He knows what to do to get them in a position to succeed. Mostert is probably going to be a good flex play for the time being. So if you need help at running back, I would take a shot at him if I were you. Only 10.6% owned. You're going to be able to get him in a lot of leagues right now. Am I going to give up like a 1 or 2 type waiver priority on him? No, I will not. We will in another player coming up soon, but not Mostert. Now, if you have a middle to low end, or if you have a decent amount of fab and can spend 10 to 15%, I'll take a shot at Mostert then at that point. Because like I said, he's going to be a PPR viable flex play for the time being. Keep an eye on him. He looked really good. This is an explosive athlete. He's not gonna run a bunch of guys over. He's not gonna be that power type back, but he's a shifty little dude. He can do a lot of damage out of the backfield. Keep an eye on him. He might not be quite a must start right now, but we'll keep an eye on that in the coming weeks. With Josh Allen mentioned as a quarterback you might want to take a shot at, we're going to talk about Frank Gore because in that little commentary about Josh Allen, we talked about Devin Singletary and what's going to happen with his injury. Well, Frank Gore is going to be the main guy in Buffalo right now, only 16.5% owned, and I can tell you his yards per carry have not been great. So he's not the Frank Gore of old, and he's not going to be. But the one thing that I mentioned that could end up helping him out is Josh Allen, right? Talked about him a minute ago. They might start using him a little bit more, maybe some run-pass option type plays that are set up. If they start doing that a little bit more and defenses have to key in on Josh Allen, it could help Frank Gore. That could be something that does help his yards per carry push up a little bit more. So Frank Gore isn't going to be like a running back 2 type start for me right now, a viable flex play. Definitely a guy in standard leagues you want to take a look at. Now in PPR leagues, Mostert, I'll take a look at him first. Thompson, I'll take a look at him first as well. We'll talk about him in a minute. But Gore and Hyde, and we'll talk about that guy too coming up. With both of those guys, they're more of like a standard play that you'll want to take a look at. But the volume is potentially there for Gore. And again, we talk about it a lot with our flex play, right? When I get the question about, hey, what guy are you going to start in the flex? A lot of times I'll pick the running back because there's more opportunity for potential volume there than there is for wide receivers. So take a shot at Gore. Put him on your bench. Who knows? If Singletary's going to have to miss some time, Frank Gore could see a decent amount of volume. He could help you get through a few weeks. Chris Thompson's making his second appearance on the show this year. Out of Washington, 48.6% owned. So again, everybody on this show has to be under 50% owned. He's close. More than likely next week, he will not be able to make an appearance here, and that's probably a good thing because we need to give him up over 50%. The dude has 18 targets through 2 games already. As a running back, that's not bad at all. He's a low-end PPR flex play for me right now, just because he's not going to see really any volume on the ground. It's going to be strictly pass catching duties. But the one thing we know is that Adrian Peterson is going to make virtually no impact in the passing game in Washington. And not only that, Washington is going to be in a negative game script a majority of the time. So that is going to fit better for Chris Thompson than it will Adrian Peterson. Now, what we saw this past weekend, Adrian Peterson is going to get 10 to 15 attempts running on the ground. The yards per carry probably won't be that great. He might find the end zone. That's going to be enough to maybe scare some people away from Chris Thompson. Don't let it. This is a guy that could build up some points rather quickly for you if you're dealing with an injury, if you need to get through some buys coming up here in the next few weeks. Chris Thompson's a guy that if you were to put in your flex position as a PPR option, he's going to get you enough points to get through the week. He has double-digit potential every single week, and especially if he were to find the end zone, then you got your guy, somebody that's going to help you win a week. So Chris Thompson should also be considered this week when filling out your waivers. I will admit Duke Johnson hasn't quite been what I wanted him to this season. I hyped him up a lot in the offseason after the trade to Houston. We're still going to monitor that and see what happens. I'm not going to give up on any hope on Duke just yet. But Carlos Hyde has also made much more of an impact on the ground than anticipated. Hyde is a guy that I liked in some other spots, but I just didn't think that he would fit well here, especially after Johnson had been there before him, that trade happening first. And I thought Johnson fit a little bit more in terms of what they would do in the passing game as well. It just hasn't come to fruition. That's okay, and that happens sometimes. We're going to continue to monitor that. However, in standard leagues, Carlos Hyde, 44.4% owned on 30 attempts this year, 173 rushing yards. He's a must-own in standard leagues for me. So if you need to get a shot to get someone into your lineup in a standard league, Carlos Hyde is not a bad guy to grab. However, keep this in mind. He has virtually no ceiling. That's right. If Hyde was a house, he's got no cathedrals up there, okay? It's a low-level ranch, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It will do the job, but you're not going to walk up and say, whoa, look at this place, okay? Carlos Hyde isn't going to do that for you either. Virtually no upside. He hasn't found the end zone yet this year. And when the Texans get into the red zone, get a little bit closer, Deshaun Watson, as we saw, okay, on Monday Night Football in Week 1, he's a guy that's going to take those carries away. He's a guy that's going to get some of those looks to get into the end zone. If the line just isn't that great, Watson's just taking too much value when they get into the red zone. There's not a whole lot there for Carlos Hyde, and they're going to throw it a lot in the red zone as well. So because of that, Carlos Hyde isn't going to see a ton of opportunities for touchdowns. It would have to be something where he broke off a really long run, and we don't want to bank on that every single week, right? And that's why that ceiling is really low for him. So again, only standard, and only if you just need like a safe play for the week. He'll have a decent floor because he's getting some volume. But you really need him into the end zone to help you out with some of that upside, and that's just not happening at this point. Golden Tate is still serving his suspension, but it's dropped his ownership just below the threshold for this show at 48.2%. And basically everybody in New York that catches passes is injured right now. So that's why Golden Tate is a guy that you should take a look at. If he's available in your league, run out there and take a shot at him and stash him on your bench. It doesn't matter if it's Eli Manning or Daniel Jones. Both of those guys are going to need a safety blanket coming up, and that's going to be Golden Tate. He's going to be a guy that, because Saquon Barkley, obviously you have to keep an eye on him. You're going to have to keep an eye on Evan Ingram, helping to stretch the field a little bit. So Golden Tate might have a little bit of room to operate. A decent PPR look for you. Again, though, we have nothing to work off this season. Is he going to be able to come back right away and have that type of a chemistry with either Eli Manning or Daniel Jones? I know Manning is still out there, but there's a lot of people calling for Jones at this point. We'll see what happens. Jones, I feel like it would even end up being an upgrade over Manning at this point. But you're going to have to get Golden Tate sooner rather than later, because if he comes back in his first week back and has a good game, you're not going to be able to get him. So get him beforehand, put him on your bench, and then we'll see what happens moving forward. Worst case scenario, we drop him again at some point. All right, I made mention of it in the running back section about whether or not we would use a top waiver wire priority on someone this week. Well, last week I told you Terry McLaurin was the guy that we wanted to get. Like, he was the number one wide receiver last week that I was looking at and saying, if I really want to add somebody this week, it's this guy. Well, he had another big game, and if you've missed out at this point, if you don't have a top 1, 2, 3 possible waiver priority, then you're going to have to get him now, or you're going to miss out. Okay, 38% owned. And one of my leagues last week where we only get $300 worth of fab money for the year, I bid $100 on Terry McLaurin and I got him. So I had to spend a third of my budget last week to get him. You're going to have to spend even more this week. More than likely, if you want to get him, you're probably going to have to use upwards of 35, 40, maybe 50% of your fab. Now, don't go crazy. If you're strong at wide receiver, you don't have to go get him. But he's a guy that is going to have value the rest of the season. I explained a little bit about why last week. But just keep in mind with him, so far he's got 16 targets and 10 receptions, 187 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's got a tough matchup next week against Chicago, but then after that, he gets the New York Giants. So I would get him this week. Go get him this week. Even if you get him this week, or if you don't get him this week, even if he were to have a bad Chicago game, I don't think anyone's going to move on from him. Will you start him next week? Probably not. Keep an eye on our start and sit videos, especially for the wide receivers, and see what Jake has to say about starting him this week. I probably would not, but I am grabbing him this week. This is a guy that has the potential to be the wide receiver 1 for his team the rest of the season. And like I mentioned with Chris Thompson, tons of negative game script. Please do what you can. Get Terry McLaurin this week. He's going to be worth it the rest of the season. Mecole Hardman, 34% owned. He was one of the guys that everybody was looking at this offseason, right? Tyreek Hill sounded like he was in danger of being suspended. So people were looking at Hardman and saying, well, he's going to be the replacement. Let's go get him. Well, Hill didn't end up being suspended, so everyone forgot about Hardman, especially after week 1 of Sammy Watkins. Now, he was a popular DFS play this week for GPP formats, but he ended up coming through. He did pretty well. So what are we going to get from him the rest of the season? 4 receptions, 61 yards, 1 touchdown this past week. But it could have been a lot bigger because he had I think it was like a 70-something yard touchdown reception that was actually called back. So there could have been even bigger numbers there for him. Tons of value while Hill is out. So that's the key. While Tyreek Hill is out, Hardman's going to continue to hold this value. Once Hill gets back and healthy, though, it's going to basically disappear. But you have to be careful because he's going to be a risky play every single week. Look from week 1 to week 2, right? Sammy Watkins had the huge week last week. Everyone was super pumped about it. Watkins had, not a bad week by any means this week, but he got outshined by Demarcus Robinson. So is this something that we could see? It might be Sammy Watkins making a big week 1 week, then Hardman. Maybe it's Robinson. Maybe it's back to Hardman, Robinson, Watkins. It could be all over the place. And then, of course, you still have Travis Kelce. So while I don't think adding Hardman is bad by any means, you should still do it if you can. I would use a mid to low waiver priority on him, maybe 20% of your fab. But the problem with Hardman, again, is it could be a roller coaster every single week. You put him in your lineup and it could end up being a dud. It could be maybe 5, 6, 7 points. You could also put him in your lineup and it could be anywhere from 20 to 30 points. So as long as you're ready to ride that roller coaster, then step on up to the gate because Mecole Hardman is a guy that you're going to want to have some shares of moving forward. Chris Conley from Jacksonville, only 18.9% owned. I brought him up last week. A lot of people are talking about DJ Shark right now. I'm not going to sing the song. A lot of people we're not going to sing Baby Shark. Not going to happen. Don't worry about that. But here's the thing with Chris Conley. So a lot of people are talking about Shark right now. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to go to Conley instead. Conley, you can probably actually pick up and not even use a waiver priority. And if you have to use Fab, you could probably put like a $1 bid on him and win him. He's got 12 targets in 2 games. He's got 170 yards in 2 games. The reason that I like him a little bit more is because I think Shark's going to be a little bit more touchdown dependent. Now, he had more targets than Conley this week, but Conley had more targets than him the week before. So it could go back and forth a little bit, but I think Conley could be a guy that in like a PPR, half PPR format is a little bit of a safer pick. I think Shark might be a little bit more reliant on some bigger plays and some touchdowns moving forward. I think Conley could be the guy that really cements himself as being like the safer pick. So if I had to basically look at this situation and compare it to another situation, not the players, don't take this out of context, but it would basically be looking at like Robert Woods compared to Brandon Cooks. Robert Woods is a little bit more of your safer PPR pick. Cooks is more of your like boomer bust, high end, get in the end zone, big plays. That's what I would kind of compare it to if I had to compare it. And again, it's not that offense. They are not those receivers. They are not putting up those points. I'm just saying situation wise, looking at that in comparison to this, that's kind of how I would relate it in talking about these two moving forward. So again, Conley might not cost you anything this week. You could probably pick them up free. Might not even need to use a waiver priority. You could wait for waiver wires to clear and then pick them up after that. And last but not least, let's take a look at the tight ends. Only 3 tight ends to name for you this week. Jason Witten being one. Now, I had Jason Witten as a sit both week 1 and week 2, and I might need to change my mind for week 3. Only 18.1% owned, but he's been able to find the end zone each of the first 2 games coming out of retirement. He's been a pretty decent option, which has kind of caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting that. Not a ton of volume, though. Okay, so I think it's going to be touchdown dependent from him week to week. And also Blake Jarwin, he's still on the field quite often. So there's not a ton of upside. If he gets in the end zone, that's fine. You're looking at maybe like a 15-point week. However, I think you're going to see more around like 10 or so each week. So keep an eye on that. The one thing I want to mention with Jason Witten and why I included him, though, is because Michael Gallup is headed for an MRI on his knee. We don't really know a whole lot at this point. I record this show on Sunday night, so you can get the information first thing on Monday. However, we don't know what's going on with that. So if they were to lose Michael Gallup, that could even open up a little bit more space, a little bit more volume opportunity for Jason Witten. So keep an eye on that. Next week, they get the Miami Dolphins, who can't seem to stop anybody. So if you need a tight end play for next week, Jason Witten could be your guy. Same thing that I mentioned with Golden Tate, I'm going to mention with Chris Herndon, only 7.5% owned. He's suspended to start the year, but he's a guy that showed out a little bit at the end of last season, built up some of that value. A lot of people were excited for him this year, and then the suspension came down. He's going to come back from a suspension. When that happens, then Chris Herndon's going to be a guy that you want to own, especially at a position that can be so volatile from time to time. Now, we've seen a lot more depth at the position this year, but Chris Herndon is a guy that if he has like one big week, you're not going to be able to get a hold of him. So the same thing with Golden Tate. Take a shot early. If you can hold him, see what happens, especially if you're dealing with injuries or ineffectiveness at the tight end position. Chris Herndon can be a decent stash for you. And at only 2.3% owned, last but not least, Will Dissly from the Seattle Seahawks. He's a guy that last season, over the first couple of games of the year, got off to a really hot start. He looked good with Russell Wilson. He looked like he can make an impact in that offense. And then he goes down with an injury, and then we don't see what happens. But week 2, a good week for him. 5 for 50, found the end zone twice, which is always good. Now, the one thing schematically with Will Dissly is that he could have a lot of room to operate because you've got Metcalf and you've got Tyler Lockett, who can both stretch the field and pull a lot of defenders that way with them. If that happens, that could give Dissly a little bit of room to maneuver in the middle of the field. If they use him, if he's getting 5 catches a week, he could put up that 5 for 50, 6 for 60 type of week each week. And of course, if he finds the end zone, that's perfect. The Seattle offense is looking good right now. Will Dissly could be a guy moving forward that you're going to want to have on a weekly basis. Maybe not to start every single week, but he could be a guy that could go in and out of the lineup when they have a good matchup. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Week 2 is in the books, and we are looking forward to Week 3. And of course, every single week, we got to take a look at what players on the waiver wire that we can pick up to improve our team. Because it isn't necessarily drafting your team that wins you championships. It's working the waiver wire throughout the year and finding those gems that end up giving your team the much-needed boost to push towards the playoffs. As always, if you have any questions, hit us up in the comments below. We'll answer as many as we can. We know that a lot of them have been going unanswered recently, but I promise you, we are trying to keep up with the amount of comments that we are getting this year. Jake and I have had to hire a couple of writers for the sole purpose of helping to answer questions. So continue to comment. We'll get to as many as possible. Don't forget, we answer a lot on the live shows as well, but we'll try to answer as many questions with this as possible. And then also, hit that subscribe button. If you have not subscribed to Headliner Nation today, not only hit subscribe, but hit the little bell notification next to it. So every time we drop a video or anytime we go live, you know, and then you can be one of the first people to watch the content every single time. And of course, if you like the content, hit the like button. We always appreciate that. Headliner Nation, thank you so much. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Fantasy Headliners. I'll catch you on the next one. Have a beautiful day.